What does US President Gerald Ford and my third grade teacher have in common? They both told me that the United States would convert to the metric system. In other words, they both lied to a 10-year-old boy. At least President Ford tried. Ms. Berg, what was that all about? Ford attempted to switch the United States to using metric with the 1975 Metric Conversion Act. This act was opposed by about 60% of Americans, and its only notable accomplishment was getting soda bottles to be sold by the liter. Which, thank God, because 2 liters of Mr. Pibb sounds a lot better than 0.5 to 8 gallons. Since the act failed, the US has moved towards metric 1 inch or 2.54 centimeters at a time. Science, medicine, and some manufacturing is converted, but anything public facing such as street signs, weather reports, or food scales are still using the imperial system. The United States isn't the only country to attempt to go metric. Canada spent 15 years moving from the imperial system to metric, and they ultimately failed. But they made it a lot further than the US. This is the story of the Canadian Metrication.
A stylized M and maple leaf symbolize metric conversion in Canada.
In 1970, the Canadian government established the Metric Commission to be responsible for implementing the metric system. There are multiple reasons that Canada or any other country would want to convert to metric. One reason is that when compared to the imperial system, the metric system is much like a small town in Wisconsin you've never heard of. It's superior. Metric conversions are more logical. 1000 millimeters to 100 centimeters to 1 meter makes a lot more sense than 12 inches to 1 foot to 0.333 repeating yards. Partial units are also much easier to visualize and express in the metric system. Also, the metric system is much better for expressing very large or very small values. You can express 1/millionth of a meter by using the prefix micro, instead of saying something like 3.9 times 10 to the negative 5 inches. Another reason Canada wanted to make the switch is to standardize with the rest of the world. The majority of the world and many of Canada's trading partners are on the metric system. Well, all except one, but we'll get back to that. With these reasons in mind, the Metric Commission started converting Canada to metric.
45 miles per hour is about 75 kilometers per hour. 60 miles per hour is about 100 kilometers per hour. And 35 miles per hour is about 60 kilometers per hour.
When trying to change the standard units of an entire country, there's some obvious hurdles. The things that come to my mind are road signs, weather reports, and most importantly, fruit by the foot. Or should I say fruit by the 30.48 centimeters. But despite these challenges, Canada got to work updating their system. In 1975, temperatures started being reported in Celsius instead of Fahrenheit, and rainfall started being measured in centimeters. In 1977, every speed limit sign was changed to say kilometers per hour, and all new cars started being manufactured with a speedometer reading in metric. In 1979, gas started being sold by the liter instead of the gallon, and throughout this entire time, schools started teaching primarily using the metric system. These changes, while seeing some resistance, were accepted into Canadian culture and mostly remain to this day. It wasn't until the Canadian government started pushing for food to be sold by the kilogram that the metrication saw real backlash.
Today, the land is in the throes of an all-out metric rebellion. The protests began slowly enough, but have developed into a boisterous, determined opposition, fighting everything and anything that's done in meters or in liters.
There were several reasons that Canadians opposed the metrication. Some of them quite reasonable.
It's an investment of $1,600, money that we don't have to put towards a scale.
And some of them quite silly.
What do we have? A metric Gestapo in the country?
One reason that many opposed the conversion was its forced nature. Small shop owners were at risk of being fined if they didn't purchase new scales that read in kilograms. Many were also concerned that changing consumer goods to be sold by the kilogram would just confuse people and make it harder to compare prices. Another reason raised by those opposing the metrication was that Canada works so closely with the US it doesn't make sense to convert. And also, what's going to happen with $5 footlongs? $5 0.305 meter long, I don't know, it doesn't work. One event that caused more resistance to metric was the Gimli glider incident. In 1983, Air Canada Flight 143 was forced to make an emergency landing when it ran out of fuel mid-flight. The quantity of fuel was miscalculated by the pilot when he used density expressed in imperial units when he should have used density expressed in metric units. The Gimli glider incident validated concerns that Canadians had with the metrication. As these concerns grew, new leadership was elected and put an end to the metrication in 1985. Canada would now use both imperial and metric units.
So the Tories took the only safe political option open. They straddled the fence and said merchants could use both systems, metric and imperial.
Today, Canada is mostly metric. Distances, speed, and weather are all described in metric, but some things, such as people's height and weight, are usually expressed in imperial units. Sometimes food is advertised by the pound for clarity, but the receipt shows it was sold in kilograms. It seems like the hardest part of metrication isn't the infrastructure changes, but getting people to think in new units. I'm somebody who works every day with metric, but when I try to eyeball the length of something, I'm still thinking in inches. I can't help myself. It's in my American American blood. I know all the conversions, but my brain is still gonna think in imperial units first. So while I think metric is a much better system, I do understand why metrication is always met with opposition. And if anything, I see the US moving towards an even worse system, if I'm being honest. Maybe we could start measuring distance in eagle beaks. It makes just as much sense as feet. Anyway, thanks for watching.